So the painting I chose was Mural by Jackson Pollock. So first we're going to learn a little bit more about Jackson. So his first name was actually Paul, and he was born in 1912 in Wyoming. For whatever reason, his family decided to move shortly after he was born, and by the time that he was 17 years old, they had moved 9 times. They mainly stayed in California and Arizona areas, and eventually he was put in Manual Arts High School in Los Angeles. This is where he learned about unconscious imagery, and this technique would have been used in several of his pieces. So in 1930, he attended Art Students League for about 3 years, and he studied composition, life drawings, paintings, and more art techniques. And he was very successful in the school. He had a lot of great connections with professors and teachers, and they all recognized his talent. But sadly, after leaving the school, he lived in poverty for about 2 years. He tried living with his older brother named Charles, who is also a painter, but he's more of a realistic, abstract painter. So Jackson definitely had the more unique methods of painting. Anyway, but this didn't work, and so this left Jackson to have like a midlife crisis. But this is where he decided to just go by Jackson. And this became, a very famous name. But thankfully, he secured a job at the Federal Arts Project as an easel painter. And it was during this time where it was during the Great Depression, or during the end of the Great Depression. So it was very crucial to have a job and be able to sustain yourself in that economy. But while he was at this job, he created his first notable painting, which was called Going West. And it was a landscape painting, and he designed it by using concepts of where he grew up. So his Western background and his childhood and things he remembers and seeing pictures of family and whatnot. And so, there's a lot of movement in the skies and the hills, and how the animals pulling the carts look very strong and powerful, and there's movement and everything. And similar to the mural, Jackson put his vision of Western life, and particularly the animals. I don't know if y'all can see it, but I can't. When he finished this painting, he was interviewed, and he claimed he was going crazy while he was painting this, because he kept seeing these antelopes and buffalo and horses and cows jumping at him, and that's why it looks so chaotic, and it looks it looks fast. To me it does. It looks rapid. But it's because his mind was also that chaotic jumble of mess. But it ended up working out. I think this actually looks really, really good, and a lot of people can see a lot of different things from it. And so we're going to learn a little bit more about, the history of the mural. So it was created for this woman named Peggy Guggenheim. I'm not sure how you say that last name. We're just going to call her Peggy. So she was an art collector, and she mainly had European art and sculptures. Her town's house was filled with all kinds of art. It was like a mini museum. But eventually, she got her assistant named Thomas to get in contact with Jackson, and eventually they worked something out where he was willing to paint something for her. Well, what she wanted was a huge, huge painting. She was wanting to host a art show in November 16th, 1943. And she wanted Jackson's piece to be hung in her entryway of her townhouse. And she wanted it to be wall to wall. And so for this, Jackson had to get a canvas that was about 8 by 20 feet. So this was behemoth. And it was the biggest painting in the Pollock collection. And I can see why. So, as all good artists do, he had art block. He complained to his friends that he was beginning to get obsessive and depressed, because he had no idea what to put on this canvas. And this is where he began to drink a lot. And that's no good for anybody. And so, of course, then Peggy began to pressure him more, and that made his drinking worse. And shocker, it did not end up happening until 1944, around New Year's Eve, that he spontaneously decided to whip up something and call it the Mural. A lot of people rumored that it was done in one night, but after people have analyzed the paint and the layers of paint, being that Jackson was an oil-based paint artist, they could see that being that the layers had dried before the other layer was put on it, it was roughly about maybe 4 to 5 weeks that this painting was done. However, majority of the right side of the painting was most likely done in one night because there were not layers of paint. It was all one glob, mainly, of paint. But it still looks good. But it was also this painting that he had a huge turning point in his artwork. Because it was here that Jackson began to use this drip method. And that's what he's mainly known for. So at the top you can kind of see there's like drips of black and that pinkish purple looking color. And a lot of the bluish turquoise mess. I don't know what color it is, but whatever. And I'm assuming he really loved it because that's what he continued to do for the rest of his life. At the bottom left corner, you can see his signature, Jackson Pollock. And in the right corner, you can see his 43, but again, it was not completed in 43. It was in 44. And now, like I said he saw a bunch of buffalo and cows and horses. I don't see that. I see faces, I see dogs. I can see a little bit of a horse in the right, but I see more faces than eyeballs. I have no idea what y'all would see, but, it's in the eye of the beholder. But back to the drip technique. So, like I said before, he was mainly known for this technique. And it was during this process where he would lay out a large canvas, and he would just take whatever paint he wanted and start drizzling, pouring, splashing, whatever he wanted on the canvas until he felt satisfied. And it was this technique that he created actually one of his, I think, the most popular painting, which is called Blue Poles. So a lot of people see like bamboo or like linemen working on poles. I'm not really sure what I see. I think it looks pretty cool. But he also created freeform. And like I said before, that he began to drink a lot. And when he did drink, he began to do this drip technique a lot more. I believe this one was done when he was drunk. It looks more aggressive and the movement looks more physical, and he has a lot of motion in this one. And then number 4, I think, is more when he was probably sober. To me, it looks like a woman in a long dress with her arms out. It's very flowy and free. It's very gentle. And this one was called number 4. So Jackson, when he was naming his pieces, he did not like to name them actual names because he felt like the name took away from the actual point of view of the art. And so for an example with Blue Poles, you see the name Blue Poles, and so you look for the blue poles. And so it kind of takes your eye away from like the different oranges and yellows and everything in like the corners. And so he typically named his stuff like number 5, number 15, number whatever. But he was a very successful man, regardless of his personal life. But when he did decide to paint and when he was drinking, he saw himself in his paintings. And so that's why they all look so different, because he was feeling a different emotion each time he painted. And he tended to judge himself when he created his pieces. Regardless, though, art critics loved his paintings. They loved the fact that Jackson pushed through the boundaries of traditional painting, and they gave his work And it gave his work a lot more energy and rhythm and movement, and just, it was so eye-catching, and they all loved it. But a little interesting, I believe. It's mainly sad. So Jackson died fairly early in life. He was 44 years old when he passed away. He had a wife, and he could not stop cheating on her. And with the drinking problems and him staying away in his art studio and working on paintings all the time, he just did not have a happy marriage. And so he began to cheat. And Peggy was one of the cheaters. Peggy was a little something else. But after having a very stressful night, he decided to go drinking. And when he went drinking, he went driving. And he had one of his mistresses in his car. And along with her was one of her friends. And being drunk, he ended up flipping his car, flinging himself out the window, and he died instantly, along with another woman in the car. After his death, he began to get a lot more famous. People sold his paintings for thousands and thousands of dollars. I believe the highest painting shortly after his death was roughly about $190,000. But regardless, he was able to step outside of the norm and create something that people truly loved and experienced, and they thought it was just something so unique. And that is Jackson Pollock. Yeah. Thanks, guys.